Greetings, folks. Mavis Ureke here. We have psychological safety training in the next 2 days. So, psychological safety training, it is our second session that we're running. We're in our first psychological safety training in November, and we are running for 2021 our first session on the 27th of January, which is Wednesday. And I just wanted to sort of chime in and talk about why is the need for psychological safety training increasing. So we are seeing an exploding demand for psychological safety training. Where are we? What is going on that is leading to the high demand of psychological safety training in organizations? So one of the things that that is sort of influencing the demand for psychological safety training is the toll of the pandemic. So the pandemic has, in some form or fashion, impacted us at a psychological level. So we cannot ignore the fact that we need people to sort of recover from the psychological harm and the psychological threats that they've experienced as a result of the pandemic. We are also noticing that, as organizations have gone through the pandemic, there's now a high focus on employee well-being. So if we are to build, proactive employee well-being programs, it is important to realize that leadership influences employee well-being. So when we're talking about employee well-being, we cannot talk of it outside of leadership. Therefore, it's psychological safety becomes pivotal because we are realizing that leadership practices, leadership styles, influence the employee well-being. And then also what we're noticing, one of the trends we're seeing is that governments are legislating psychological safety or psychological well-being. Australia, Canada already have some legislation that speaks to, the importance of psychological safety or the importance of organizations not, engaging in practices or policies or activities that result in psychological harm for their own employees. So that is from a legislative framework. What we're also seeing that is that 2020 going forward, this decade has been regarded as a culture decade. So most organizations are going to be building their own cultures. They're going to be, enhancing their own cultures. And in my work, I've done 1 or 2 culture health, sort of health checks where organizations were going through cultural transformation, and to realize that some of the organizations, the reason the cultural change was stagnating or was taking longer or was not even happening was because of the lack of psychological safety within the organization. So if we are to build strong cultures, if we are to transform our cultures, it cannot happen outside of psychological safety. So psychological safety becomes an anchor of all the activities or the change that we engage in to sort of have cultural transformation. So really an anchor for cultural transformation psychological safety is. And we are also realizing that we can no longer just separate health and safety. So we have often focused on health and safety, and we're realizing that health and safety, the physical health and safety is impacted by psychological safety, right? So the physical safety is actually impacted by psychological safety. So we can no longer separate the two. When we talk about health and safety in the workplace, we also need to include the component of psychological safety. So these are some of the trends that we're seeing. We're also seeing that as we have the Gen X, the Gen Y, the young people in the workplace, these people are placing so much value on relationship, so much value on their psychological, health and safety. So we can no longer continue to ignore these trends that are happening. Looking at, the even 2020 also started with the demand for social justice. So a lot of organizations are relooking or, relooking at their DEI strategies, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or they are now starting to engage in DEI activities, diversity, equity, and inclusion activities, as also as part of building the culture, the organizational culture, but also as part of social justice, sort of part of engaging in restorative justice because of the injustice that we have seen. So that again speaks to, if we are going to build sound DEI initiatives. So DEI initiatives that really move the needle, we need to have a psychological safety as an anchor. So this is very important for us to be discussing, or to be talking, or to be taking our leadership, our leadership teams, senior managers, the executives, for them to understand what is psychological safety. If we want to improve performance, for example, one of the things that hinder performance and results in organizations is that psychological threat, right? So unintended, unintentional behaviors that result in psychological threats can actually hinder performance within an organization. And this is why psychological safety is becoming very, very pivotal, but also highly demanded, and the result going to explode for the next couple of months or years to come. So this is why, if you are ahead of the curve, you are engaging in psychological safety training now for your organization and for your teams. So I look forward to seeing you there now or in the future. Thank you for listening.